Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are back on the Update Winged Lions dev server, and it's time to have a look at another vehicle which is sat in the files right now. And this is the UK AC1 Sentinel, or should I say the Australian tank. This vehicle is of Australian origin, being the AC1 Sentinel, and it is a show of wonderful Australian engineering. We obviously already have a few Australian vehicles in the game, such as the Boomerangs, which are really nice to see, and also another premium vehicle in the form of the Australian tanks. Now, with the AC1 Sentinel, this will be an extra vehicle on top of that. For me personally, when I have a look at this vehicle, what I see is a vehicle which is probably going to be a Operation Winter vehicle. It might also be a Battle Pass vehicle. I highly doubt this is going to come in as just a standard premium tank. So this vehicle has access to it actually has access to volumetric armor on its hull, which is really cool. You can see at certain points it actually goes up to over 400, so it's going to be pretty tanky. It also has this interesting area here, which isn't exactly a weak spot, more of a slight place where the armor is basically the same. It's a machine gun port. Then the turret itself is also volumetric, so pretty much this whole vehicle is volumetric. The only place that isn't is the tracks, so they've done a really interesting job on this. It doesn't have volumetric on the sides of the turrets, but on basically all the front of the machine, and also on the back here it is all the variable thickness stuff. It does have 25mm above the engine, which kind of worries me, especially if there isn't anything else under it, because that's 25mm that planes are going to go through really easily to try and take out the engine deck. Also, this thing has the cupola, which doesn't have a ton of armor either, but it can get up to, 35 at a specific angle. Now, this machine has a crew of 5, and also it's 28 tons, and you'd think with such a huge engine deck, this thing must have a massive engine, right? I mean, it's 292 horsepower, probably in a stock state, 3050 RPM. But look at this. It actually has 3 engines. It has 3 tiny engines which power this thing, which is a definite interesting configuration, and probably the reason why it has such a big booty, which is covered in a radiator and also some fuel tanks all around the place. This to me is one of the oddest configurations I've ever seen. It actually reminds me of a naval configuration. Generally, when you have a look at PT boats, they have this configuration of engines where you have 1 in the center and 2 on the sides in a diagonal triangle sense, but it looks like the Sentinel has that as well. It also, because it has these 3 stacks of engines, it also has this really awkward transmission. This vehicle would seem like a pain to fix if anything ever went wrong on it, but it can go forward at about 40 kilometers an hour and doesn't really go backwards, so keeping up with that true Commonwealth tradition of not being able to get out of places that you get yourself stuck in. With a crew of 5, you have the machine gunner, the driver on the left, and then also the loader, the commander, and the gunner in the turret. It's quite a cramped turret, but the vehicle does have access to the 40mm or the 2-pounder, and that means that its fire rate's going to be good, and it also has good gun depression. It also has access to a pretty good vertical speed along with the depression. You'll be able to move the gun at a decent click for the level that it's at, which is 2.7 right now, and since it is the 2-pounder, it also gets access to a bunch of different rounds. You got the APT, the HE, the APC-BC, and also the APT or the APHE, which pens a little bit less but does a little bit more oomph. The 2-pounder normally pens pretty well. Now you can see here that it has up to 89mm of pen, but generally the damage it does after that is not always the best. But in this case, I think it'll be fine. Then it also gets access to artillery, doesn't get access to smoke at all, so once again not really being able to save yourself when it comes to survivability, and everything else is pretty standard on the machine. But as a rank 2 little vehicle, right now it also is labeled as a pack vehicle, which is kind of interesting. Maybe they'll make it like a beginner's pack thing or something like that, but normally if it's going to be like an operation vehicle, it'll normally have a GE cost attached to it. So maybe they're going to sell it with regards to a certain event or with regards to something that is going to go on in the game. We'll have to see. Maybe a little Christmas special. It does have access to some skins as well, making it look dapper in not just Australian colors, but also in all of the rest. And the only real downside of this machine is the fact that I feel like in some areas it is lacking. So its turret traverse isn't the best. When it comes to its actual traverse of the vehicle, it's not the best. When it comes to its just general mobility, it's a lot less than you would hope from a vehicle like this. What you would hope for is a little bit more speed around the place, a little bit less just chugging about. But when I was testing it earlier, the one thing that I found was that it just wasn't very quick. It's just one of those vehicles which kind of saunters about at a very low pace. And normally at 2.7, when you have a look at the British tech tree, you have stuff like the SARC, for example. And you can see it has the coaxial machine gun working. You have stuff like the SARC and you have stuff like the Crusaders, which are generally a lot faster. And then you just have this thing to just saunter around in. With the weird complexion of this vehicle, with the weird setup of this vehicle, I think it's definitely worth saying that it is unique. It does have a lot of weird and wonderful things to it. Not just the tri-engine, not just access to the volumetric armor, not just access to a pretty good 2-pounder. It's just a very interesting vehicle in itself. And this may become more of a collector's item than something that will be completely useful when it comes to the game. I think if I played this for a long time, I'd get a little bit frustrated by its mobility, but also I would be able to appreciate the amount of work that has gone into building this vehicle when it comes to its general size, when it comes to its general shape, and the uniqueness of it. There's nothing really like this in the game. Obviously you have the other AC, which is kind of like it, but it's very different in the way that it's set up, and because of that, it's kind of the ideal premium. It also gives us another Australian vehicle in the game, and Australian vehicles, along with other Commonwealth nation vehicles, are always lovely to see. With the expansion of the South Africans, when it came to the subtree for Britain, and then also with the updated models of the boomerangs, maybe, just maybe, there's something more special coming for the Australians. And this might be the first step into that realm. Maybe a sub-tech tree. Maybe even an independent tech tree. But that might be asking a little bit too much of this nation. Australia has some interesting vehicles. The Matilda Hedgehog has already been added. Some of the ACs are now added, and the boomerangs are added. The question is, what may we see next? And the secondary one is, how is this going to get into the game? What way is it going to find itself in? I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Professor X 1718, Orangetail, Sakoshi Tiger, BRFC 15, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, and then Kyle Kin, Bareen, Lafouche, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.